Hello, everybody, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I am Bill, the company's expert, and welcome to the weekly live stream where we talk about everything to do with job interviews, job search, discovering jobs, resumes, answers to interview questions, careers, exit interviews, all that kind of stuff, all rolled up into one. This is episode number 78, and the title of this episode is Best Resume Format for Job Applications. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Before that, we're going to briefly talk about facial hair in job interviews. And this is from the perspective of guys, right? You know, if you're wondering, what should I do with my facial hair? You've come to the right place. We're going to talk about that. I want to thank first of all my participants. Thank you for being here. To all my subscribers, my channel members, you guys are awesome. My Patreons, super thanks donors, super chat people, all you guys are cool. Thank you for being here. We're gonna learn together. Actually, I want to do something a little bit different today. I want to do a shout out to another YouTube channel that I think is doing a pretty awesome job. This is the channel Life Work Balance. So if you like what I do here, check out this channel. This is from someone called Abby, who is a recruiter, and she talks about a lot of the same stuff that I talk about job interviews, that kind of stuff, but she comes at it from a more psychological perspective, and also she gives you more of the recruiter's perspective. So between her channel and mine, and a lot of the other resources out there, you will do well to get your knowledge from these various places. So go out, check out Life Work Balance. Okay, we are going to cover some stuff today. Oh, by the way, public service announcement. I found the latest new extreme sport. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's called Death Unicycle. I don't know exactly what it entails, but if you do and you have heard of this, let me know. Then we can go on this journey together, shall I say. I don't do it. I'm just saying I've heard about it. Okay, I thought it was... the title was striking. Let me put it that way. Okay, let's dive into this. So we're going to talk about facial hair in job interviews before we talk about resumes. Let me just cover that for a second because I did get several questions and I don't think I've ever actually done a video on that topic before. So let's get into it. Now, listen, in the last 10 years, 20 years, mainly I think 10 years, there's been a little bit of a shift. You see more young people with beards and stuff. In the 70s, 80s, 90s, where I was more familiar with things, clean shaven was the way to go, and it kind of still is, but there's been a little bit of a shift where people are more accepting of young people in professional jobs with full beards and things like this. There's still some things that are not really accepted yet, maybe, I don't know. Like one thing I have not seen is people that shave their entire face, guys that shave their entire face, but yet don't shave their neck. So you got a big puff of hair on your neck. I haven't seen that. Hey, or the sort of sideways mohawk where you shave the front of your head, the back of your head, and you got like a mohawk this way, right? It comes down to join your sideburns and your goatee. So you look like a flower, right? Haven't seen that yet, but people are more accepting of full beards. However, if you've been wondering what the deal is, okay, traditionally, and this is still the case, okay, the reason why you see a lot of executives, a lot of decision makers where they have a clean shaven face is because clean shaven makes you look more approachable. Some guys may not realize this, but facial hair, mustaches, beards, okay, on some level, you look a little bit more threatening, okay, a little bit more unapproachable. Obviously not if somebody knows you, but if you're a stranger, and a stranger has like a full beard, okay, generally speaking here, that is usually what's going on at a psychological level or a subconscious level. So that was the reasoning behind it. There is a reason why you don't see a lot of CEOs with handlebar mustaches, generally speaking. There are exceptions to everything, but that's the general rule. So if you are going to be getting any type of job where you want to appear more professional, appear more approachable, and as we all know, being likable is a big sort of thing in job interviews. Part of that is being approachable, being non-threatening. You don't want to be intimidating in a bad way. Okay. So for that reason, traditionally there has been what people would call nowadays a bias towards or against facial hair. Okay. However, the thing that still takes precedence is industry culture. If you're trying to get a job in a tattoo parlor or something, these rules may not apply. Okay. The thing that trumps everything is the culture of the industry. So go and do a Google search, Google image search, go and do a LinkedIn people search, look at the people, okay, that you're going to be interviewing or that are in that business or that company. And you will get a feel for what is acceptable in terms of facial hair, what they're used to, okay? And what you want to do as much as possible is look like them, look like you belong there, okay? So facial hair follows these rules too, okay? Yeah, it's all about industry norms. Okay, so that's basically the idea behind facial hair. If I didn't know what the deal was and I was going in for a job and I was, say, 25 years old, I would go in clean shaven unless it's like a major issue for you. I would just do that as a default thing, okay? And it doesn't become an issue. The only time it might become an issue is if you have like a lot of facial hair. So, you know, that's why I've been clean shaven in professional circles for decades. You know, I went through the period of my life when I was young. I had the handlebar mustache. I went through the period where I had the goatee. I had the sideburns. I had the mutton chops at one point, like it's 1890. You can party like it's 1890 and grow the mutton chops really bushy. But in professional circles, clean shaven is the way to go if you're a guy. It still is. There are certain pockets where, you know, the culture is that that's not the case. For example, in IT for many years, full beards have been a thing. If you're a professor, okay, in that world, in academia, full beards and prominent facial hair have been a thing for many years. So there are exceptions, but clean shaven is the way to go by default. So that's what I have to say to that question. Okay. Moving on to the topic, the meat and potatoes of our discussion today. We're talking about resumes. And I really haven't done this for a while. I've kind of mentioned resumes here and there, and I've answered questions about them. But let's get into resumes, something that I don't normally talk about. Okay, so the topic is the best format for your resume for job applications. Okay, I'm going to lay some principles on you. I'm going to lay 8 principles on you about resumes. These are the guiding principles that basically inform you what's going on and what you should do, according to me. The gospel according to me. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. There's something that I've done many times. I'm going to do it again just as a starting point. I'm going to do a screen share. And I'm going to show you something very, very simple, elementary, that you can do as a starting point. Okay. Let's see if I can share my screen. Here we go. Okay. So, resume examples. Okay. You know what? You could do it in Google, but I'm going to do this in Bing. Actually, I'm going to do this properly here. Let's get Bing going. I do prefer to use Bing for certain searches. And this is one of them. Okay, so bing.com. All right, it's got that lovely name for the hint of professionalism. So go to images and we're going to type in resume examples. And this is what you get. Okay, you get a ton of resumes. And what you can do is you can do this. You can just sort of scroll through them like this, okay? Now, to take it to the next level, you can also type in the name of a position, a job, okay? So if you're going to be a project manager or, you know, something like that, you can look at resumes that are, in theory, a little more tailored to the project manager role. Okay. And just get a feel for some of the things that different people do. Okay. So you can see the extreme range of possibilities that there are out there for doing a resume. Okay. I'm not saying that every single one of these resumes is the way to go, but you can get an idea for the broad scope of what's possible here and what's done. And the first thing that you take away from this is that resumes vary quite a bit. There's a lot of different styles. There's a lot of different types of things people put on their resumes. Let's start narrowing it down. Okay, so let's start with the basics here. A lot of times, people assume that a resume is like a trophy. It's like a list of your accomplishments, the things of which you're most proud. That's how a lot of people regard their resumes. This is incorrect. Okay, if that's the way you look at your resume, you probably are not getting a lot of responses to the job applications you send out. And the reason is because you're misunderstanding what a resume is. It's not a sort of trophy of all your accomplishments and experiences and education of which you're the most proud. It's a marketing document. It's something you use for a specific purpose that gets a result. It's something you use to apply for a job, and its sole purpose is to get you the interview. Okay? That's what the resume is. Now, in order for that to be effective, your resume is not a static document that just stays the same for every job that you apply to. That will not be very effective. If you keep your resume frozen and just keep using it and sending it out all the time for different jobs, chances are it's not going to get a lot of responses. The resume should be tailored to the jobs that you apply for. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say that, like, well, if I apply for 1,000 jobs in a day, which is possible, how can I tailor my resume for each one? That's way too labor intensive. It's way too time consuming. It's not practical. Well, here's the deal. You shouldn't be applying for 1,000 jobs in a day, in my opinion. Instead, you should be applying for less jobs, but you should be doing a much better quality application, because in the end, you will get more interviews by following that approach. Okay? So everyone needs to understand your resume is a document. Its sole purpose is to get you the interview. And in order to do that, it needs to be flexible. It needs to change depending on what job you're applying for. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. It's a marketing document. It's not sort of a trophy laundry list of your accomplishments to fuel your ego and self-worth. You can certainly make one of those, okay? And that's fine. But what you send out to apply for a job, it should be about what the recruiter cares about and not necessarily about what you care about that matters, because you're trying to convince them, not you. Okay, let's start with the basics. What is going to change on your resume depending on what job you apply for? Well, the first thing is going to be the lingo. So if you apply for one job where they use specific terms, right? Let's say they use the term frontline manager. Okay, that's what was in the job description, and maybe that's the title of the role that you're applying for, frontline manager, right? You would want to make sure that your resume contains the term frontline manager, so that if you have experience as a frontline manager, it says frontline manager. It doesn't say supervisor. It doesn't say, lead hand or any other equivalent term. It says frontline manager, right? Now, this is important if your resume is going to go through an ATS system where they do searches for keywords. It's also important if your resume is going to be read by a human, okay? Because if it's read by a recruiter, and some recruiters are pretty awesome at their jobs, but a lot of others aren't. And I think sometimes people give recruiters a little too much credit. recruiters often don't understand really anything about the jobs that they're trying to fill. They've been given the job, and they've been given the role, the job assignment, and their function is to fill that role with a candidate, to find candidates that are qualified for that role. And they themselves don't know what a frontline manager is. They've never worked as a frontline manager. They don't really understand what skills or experiences are important to be a frontline manager, right? But when they get a resume from you that doesn't have the words frontline manager anywhere in it, that's going to give them the impression that you're just not qualified. You've never done this job. You don't know anything about this job. You have no experience that's related to this job. So they reject your application, which is a shame because they've come to the completely incorrect conclusion. You are quite qualified. It's just that you were calling that term supervisor, and you've worked as a supervisor for 20 years, and you have a lot of experience and accomplishments as a supervisor. The only problem was you didn't use the term frontline manager, and they weren't even aware that frontline manager and supervisor mean the same thing in the context in which you wrote it. Okay, so at the very basic level, you've got to change the lingo so that it matches what they put in their job description and that they're looking for. Okay, that's the first thing you got to put in there. Okay, you got to customize your resume so it includes their lingo. Okay. Now, the other thing about your resume is that your resume is kind of like, I hate the word branding sometimes because I think people use that word all the time. They use it for things that they shouldn't be. But essentially, your resume is going to be a part of your branding. It states your identity, who you are, right? So if my job title was, let's say I was supervisor, okay? And I was applying for a role as supervisor in a company, what would be good is if I sent a resume and it had my name at the top, and then under my name it had some kind of tagline that says who I am. So I could say, I'm Bill Todd. I'm a supervisor. I'm a supervisor in this context. A manufacturing plant where we produce plastic injection molding, right? Something like that. We do plastic injection molding and we make plastic parts. So that's who I am. I'm a supervisor of injection molding processes in plastics manufacturing. That's my tagline. You see, that tells people who I am. It tells the recruiter who I am, right? So a tagline is very important. It's like a term. At the very longest, it could even be almost a sentence, but it's basically a few words. Now, sometimes you get people that expand the tagline into like a paragraph, and they call that different things. They call it, like, I think, a career profile, or I forget the terminology, but they can call it various things. But you could say, I'm a injection molding professional. I have 20 years in experience in a supervisory role, supervising employees that work in this particular process. I myself am an expert on this process. And I've made process improvements in a variety of applications to, doing injection molding, something like that. Okay, so it's longer than a tagline. It's almost like a paragraph. You're describing who you are, right? And that goes right at the top of your resume. And the thing is, what you've got to understand is that when you send out a resume, if it does go to a human, okay, if a human ends up looking at it, like presumably a recruiter, they're not going to read it in its entirety. They're going to spend a handful of seconds looking at your resume. And so the essentials, what you want them to know, have to be obvious when someone only has a few seconds to look at your resume. Okay? So this is the other important thing. This is a very important concept. People are not going to read your resume in depth unless they've shortlisted you for an interview, usually. And even then, they don't really read a lot of it in depth. I don't think a lot of recruiters even read your resume comprehensively, period. That's just been my experience. Yes. So that's another important concept. You have to draw out the essentials and make them very obvious. Okay. So, I'm going to enumerate these for you here. I'd written these out. I'm going to enumerate them. So number one is that you can do a Bing search or even a Google search, do an image search, find examples of resumes, see the range of different things that are out there. Number two, understanding that your resume is a marketing document. Its sole purpose is to get you an interview for that specific job that you've applied for. Okay. That means it has to change. It has to be adapted to the recipient, to what they're looking for. Number three, at a basic level, you have to make sure the lingo matches. So that's something that's going to vary depending on what job you're applying for. You have to use their terms so that they recognize the things that they're looking for on your resume. Okay, and thus come to the conclusion that you're qualified. Number four, your resume, it has to be sort of you at a glance. It has to be your branding tool. And I would say within 10 seconds, they have to be sold on the fact that you're qualified for the job. So all the things that they were looking for in the job description under requirements, they said, we're looking for someone who has this. That has to pop out at them in the first 10 seconds. Now, one of the things that I did many years ago, I don't know if I necessarily recommend this across the board, but I did this, is that I would highlight certain things on my resume. That was one way to make certain things jump out, right? If your resume is like a blank page and you have like 4 things highlighted on it, those tend to jump out. You can't highlight like every second word, but you can highlight maybe 4 or 5 things on a page. And that can sometimes help. That will not help an ATS system to find those keywords, but you shouldn't need to do it in that situation. It will help with a human. Okay. So that's what we've covered so far. Okay. I talked briefly about your tagline. Tagline is who you are. So if you're introducing yourself, what do you say? You'd say, hello, I'm Bill Todd, I'm a student. Or you'd say, hello, I'm Bill Todd, I'm a professional engineer. Or you'd say, hello, I'm Bill Todd, I'm a former CEO. Or you would say, hello, I'm Bill Todd, I'm a World War II enthusiast. It's how you're choosing to identify yourself to the person that you're meeting. Your resume's got to do that. That's what a tagline is. So you have your name and you say who you are. And if they're looking for a supervisor, if assuming this is true, you would probably want to say something like, hello, I'm Bill Todd, supervisor with 20 years experience in this particular area, something like that. And that's how you identify. So already they're hearing things that they're liking, that they're looking for. Okay. I've heard it said that, if you are really good at this, you can sell yourself entirely with the sort of name, tagline, and what you would term as like a career profile or career summary. Like, this is who you are, where you explain it in a couple of sentences. That assumes, of course, that part of your resume is prominent enough that people will read it, right? No harm in shooting for that. That would be the ideal, but I think that it's a lot easier to get people to like look at individual words popping out rather than a paragraph at the top popping out. But that's just me. Okay. So that was point number 5. If you can try and sell someone with your summary at the top, that would be ideal. The next point, number 6 that I want to make is to do with how you present yourself. If you describe your duties, like what you do, I do this, I use this software, I complete this process. I work at this job. That in itself doesn't sell you. The reaction of the other person is, why should I care? If you say that to a recruiter, they're looking at different applicants, and then now they're looking at you, and they come to you and you say, well, I do this and I do that. I perform these duties. I have these responsibilities. The reaction from a recruiter is usually going to be, who cares? Okay? Because you're talking about yourself. What I want to do is, what can you do for me? What can you do for this company? Why would we want to hire you? Okay, this is about us. Why would we want to hire you? What can you do for us, right? So instead of phrasing like, these are the duties that I have and this is what I do, instead, as a general rule, you want to phrase your statements as, this is what results I get. This is what I can do for you. Okay? So if you say instead of, I do this process or I complete these forms, instead you say, I make sure that this process is done very efficiently. I make sure that when I work in customer service or something, I make sure that the levels of customer service satisfaction are among the best in the industry. Something like that. You're talking about the results you get rather than the things you do, rather than the actions you perform. Does that make sense? You want to talk about results and not tasks. That's kind of a general way to express your value to another party. Okay, so that applies in your resume. So instead of saying, I do this, I take these forms, I process them, I fill out time cards, I answer phones. Instead, you talk about what are the results that you get when you do that. I make sure that, customers are always happy. I make sure that, public inquiries get routed promptly and accurately to the person that can answer their questions. I make sure that, our mistake rates or our defect rates for this particular process are, below 5%, whatever it is, right? So that's what I recommend that people learn that principle, okay? That's point number 6. I guess did I get rid of my window? I think I did, didn't I? Anyway, when I had the screen up, when we were doing the Bing search and we were going through all the different resumes, you guys might have noticed some of the resumes that scrolled by. You got different types of resumes. You got the chronological resume, and then you got the functional resume. There's two kind of types of resumes. There are two basic types. There are others, like there's a hybrid resume, which is like, a little bit of one and a little bit of the other. But basically, you got those two types of resumes. The chronological resumes, that's where you list all your work experience. So you say, I started here, I did this, then I worked here, with these dates, and then I worked here, with these dates, then I worked here with these dates, right? That's a chronological resume. The vast majority of the resumes you're going to see are going to be some variant of the chronological resume. There's also the functional resume. Functional resume, that's where there's no dates. It's not about what jobs you've done. It's about who you are and what can you do. Now that resume format is more appropriate for if you're at middle management level and up, okay? Not super, tailored to lower level jobs. They're also really good for if the person already knows you. It's sort of a summary of you. Here's what I do. These are the results I get. Here's how I do it. Here's the approach I take. And, this is who I am. That's more useful at higher circles. So what I'd recommend for most people, especially if at your lower level, worker level, is some form of chronological resume. And the kind that we, or at least I most often see, are technically reverse chronological formats. So you start out with your most recent experience, the newest job you've had, latest job, maybe your current job, and then you go further into the past as you go down. Before that, I did this. Before that, I did that. Before that, I did that, right? That's the reverse chronological format. That's pretty much what my recommendation would be. You can do something called a hybrid resume, which is basically what I just described, a reverse chronological resume, but at the top, maybe the first quarter of the first page or the first half of the first page, there's a little section that sort of summarizes you. That's where you have your tagline and your career summary and things like this. You can get away with that, but you have to tailor it. You have to tailor it to the job that you're applying for. Okay, so basically I recommend a reverse chronological format. So you start with your experience and then you have your education right at the end. 2-page resume. No 3-page resumes. Sometimes you can get away with 1 page, but basically most people are going to have a 2-page resume. If you're just coming out of school, like you haven't really had a career job in your life, like I guess a 1-page resume, you can get away with it. But try and fill it out. Try and have it be a page and a half. You can talk about some of the activity you've done in your education, like some of the group work, maybe some research you had to do, or particular skills in particular areas. Things like this that might be helpful. But the vast majority of people are going to have a 2-page resume. Okay. I'm just trying to think what else there's some things that, people make a big deal about not putting certain things on the resume or putting certain things like saying, references available on request, things like that. It's not the end of the world, but that doesn't really add a lot of value. The standard for many years was if you had a Myers-Briggs type indicator to put that on there. 5 years ago, that was a non-issue. You'd have that on there if you had it. It doesn't really help that much, but it doesn't really hurt. Some people are into it, some people aren't. Nowadays, we're sort of going away from that slowly. I don't know if that's really fallen from favor yet, but if you have it on there, for me personally, I'm interested to see, because that does tell you something about the person. It's not this be-all, end-all that they seem to want it to make it, and then got upset when it wasn't. But it tells you some basic stuff about the person. But the bottom line is that you don't want a bunch of stuff on there that has nothing directly to do with the job that you're applying for. This is if you're going through a recruiter. You don't want a bunch of things that are unrelated to the job you're applying for. If you're dealing with a hiring manager, it's not the end of the world, but specifically if it's a recruiter, they start to see it as a negative if you have a lot of things on there that aren't directly related to the job in question. Okay? Because the way they think is that what they're looking for is they're wanting to find someone who is specialized for that role. And the more things you have on your resume where they're jobs other than something directly related to the one you're applying for, is each one counts as a negative. You lose points for each one because it then looks like you're more of a generalist, and there's a bunch of silly conclusions they derive from that, like, you're not specialized in it. So just be aware of that. If you've got a lot of stuff like that, I would actually take some of those off your resume if you're applying for a specific job. It feels really bad doing that. It feels like a part of you dies each time. A little piece of you dies because you're proud of that experience and you know that it's valuable. You've learned a lot of things. And I agree. But the problem is that recruiters are trained to view that as a lack of focus, and it dilutes the skills that you actually do have that are directly related. Okay. And we've talked about hybrid resumes. They're best for middle management and up and executives. So most people are not really going to be doing those. And they're not really good for ATS either, like for what that's worth. People on ATS, they look for keywords. They look for, terms, like dates, years of experience. Recruiters love to use years of experience as some kind of metric for how good of an employee you are. We all know that is crap, but the industry norm is for them to think like this. So, you know what I mean? So unfortunately, to be successful at their game, you have to play by their rules and include that. Okay. So that's 8 points I've made. Number 7 was the reverse chronological format. And number 8 was that hybrid resumes are only really useful for mid-level management and up. Okay, so that's 8 principles that will guide you in doing a resume that will accomplish its goal, which is for you to get called in to an interview for that particular role. That's the sole purpose of the resume. And you do it by giving the decision maker, usually a recruiter, what they're looking for. And what they're looking for is they want to see the requirements that they listed in the job description. They want to see those, the exact words on your resume, describing your experiences, describing what you know how to do, and describing who you are. Okay? So by definition, that means you have to tailor your resume to every job that you apply for if you're taking it seriously. And I would recommend you only apply for jobs that you take seriously and do this. Because just firing a generic resume out to like 1,000 jobs will not produce a lot of bites. Okay? And for those of you that have done this, you know what I'm talking about. Okay? And that's what I have to say about resumes. Let's go over to questions today. I see Carmiago is here. Carmen San Diego is here. Nice to see you, Bill. Happy Monday. And to you too, Carmiago. Thanks for being here. And I recognize you from previously. Bumbalo is here. Can't wait to stay for the stream, but thanks for making content. I'll watch it later. Okay, yeah, my streams are up for your viewing pleasure later, late at night, right? When no one's around. And you dim the lights and you can watch my stream and get what you need. Ivan is here, says, always been watching your videos, but this feels different. Thanks a lot for the share. Yeah, well, the great thing about these live streams is I can just ramble on at length, and some people seem to stay for it, so it's great. Can't always put this stuff in a video because the video would be so long and scattered. It would be torture for most people to watch, but I can do it here. So there you go. It also gives me a chance for you guys to tell me what you're struggling with and what are some of the hot issues that you're concerned with and you're trying to navigate around. So that's useful too. Phantom Valentine says, I just came in, but I hear you're supposed to only have 3 bullet points for their job description skills. Can we have more? Or does this turn recruiters off? If you have more than 3 bullet points, you will be taken out and shot. Just so you know that. You may not do that. As we all know, this is not a free country. No countries in the world are free, and you are not allowed to do anything like that, just so you know. I'm just kidding, of course. You can do whatever the hell you want. As I showed you visually, 15 minutes ago, there are so many different types of resumes out there. You can scroll through them, and you can see that people are not following that rule, right? You can format it whichever way you want, as long as you're upholding the principles. The most important of which is that they are looking for those keywords. They're looking for that lingo reflected back at them. So whichever way you can format it that makes that obvious, so when they glance at your resume for a few seconds, they immediately see that you have the things that they said they were looking for. That piques their interest, and that will persuade them to shortlist you. So it doesn't matter how many bullet, you have your entire resume could be a list of bullet points, right? But as long as when you look at it and in 5 seconds you can see, they've got that, they've got 6 years experience here, they've got 6 years experience with that, they've got this skill that we were looking for, and they've got that. Okay, this person looks like a contender. I'm going to put this on the short list, right? So don't get hung up in all these little niggling rules. And the other thing, of course, is that everybody's got their own, preferences for how to do a resume. You ask 20 hiring managers how someone would do a resume what's the best way to do a resume? You'll get 20 different answers. That's the thing. Everybody's got their own preferences. Some people like little graphs and statistics. Some people don't. Some people like, to be very dense with a lot of accomplishments, and other people don't, right? As long as you're conveying the things that they're looking for prominently using their lingo and they pop, okay, that's what's important. And you're not watering it down with a million other things that aren't relevant. Okay? But does that make sense, Phantom Valentine? You can follow that rule if you want, but it's not like this rule that if you break it, then, you will taste nothing but failure. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Nana Yaw says, do you have favorite font for editing the resume? No. The fonts that I use professionally, I limit it to 2. There's Helvetica for a lot of things, and then there's Times New Roman. Times New Roman is like, the traditional business font, literary font, looks very professional. Helvetica is like 20th century, I believe, and onwards. And it's a good, neutral, highly readable font. So those two, those two are good, but I don't have specific preferences. If you start writing in like wingdings and, things like this, yeah, it's gonna detract, right? But there are many different professional fonts. I wouldn't get hung up on any one. If you're on a Microsoft platform, Arial is fine, but Times New Roman is ubiquitous. Every platform, every computer or tablet has Times New Roman, I believe. So, if you want it to look professional, that's a good one to go with. Where was I here? So Carmiego says, how should stretch assignments, gigs like GIGs? I don't know what that is. You need to spell out acronyms. Don't just use acronyms, because I don't know what that means. I'm talking to people all over the world and in every industry, so I won't know acronyms. So how should stretch assignments be treated? An opportunity to develop internally in another role? How to take advantage of gigs? Should we request them to our manager? Does it lead to promotion? Okay, if you could define GIG, that would be a help, Carmiego. I'll be happy to get back to you. Phantom Valentine, I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, I got so hung up on the details. Too many supposed gurus say do this. Yeah, look, who am I to say people are wrong? They're not wrong. I'm sure they're right some of the time. Of that, I'm sure. But saying like this particular rule is like an absolute rule across the board, usually that's not the case, right? As I showed with the first thing that I visualized, I'm going to do this very, very quickly again, just for the people who missed it, okay? For the people who missed it, I'm going to do a very quick screen share here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're talking about rules of how to do resumes, okay? Resume example, supervisor, okay? Let's try that. Let's go to images. This is Bing, and I'm using images. Now, you just start scrolling through these. You can see, look, we're talking about fonts. We're talking about rules, about bullet points and things like look at the variation, okay? Now, you can go through literally hundreds of these, right? Some things are common. There's a lot of common points, but there's a hell of a lot of different points here, right? And as I said before, I'm not saying that every one of these is like a shining example of what you should do. I'm just saying that there's so many variations for how to do a resume, okay? You've got columns all over the place. You've got some people have little graphs and statistics. Other people don't. Some people have very dense text. Other people have a lot of like white space, right? Some people have like a really prominent header section, and other people don't, right? So you're getting all kinds. So the important points about a resume transcend things like font and line justification and columns and page breaks and things like this, right? they have to communicate key pieces of information at a glance to the recruiter. And you need to give the recruiter what they care about. And in order to know what they care about, go back to the job description and look at what they said they cared about, right? That's what you want to ideally feed back at them without it being a complete lie, right? So use their lingo, talk about the things that they said they're looking for, and have those prominent, right? So for example, let's just go back here. Okay, this resume here that I've got on the screen. Now, what pops? Well, yeah, you can see my cursor. So I can see this title here, Krona and Sons, and I can maybe see the job title, Laboratory Supervisor. If you were in Britain, the UK, you'd be saying laboratory, right? And if you were in France, you'd say superviseur, right? But this is what pops. That's what pops. Academy of Art University, Bachelor of Engineering, and the name of the company. So are these the things that the recruiter is hoping you would have? Do they say, we want someone from Krona and Sons? Probably not. But they may say, we want someone with skills in this area, you know, that has laboratory supervisor experience. Now, if that's the case, if that's what they did say, I would make that big. I'd make it jump so that when you're scrolling through these, which is kind of what they're doing, right? That's the stuff that pops out to you when you're only looking at this page for a few seconds, like 5 seconds. Okay? So the font and the layout doesn't really matter that much in absolute terms, as long as they're gleaning the right information from it. Okay? Where are we here? Okay, where was I here? So, yeah, and Phantom Valentine is doing a fantastic job, by the way. You know, you're asking very intelligent questions, and you're taking my slightly snarky response in good humor, and that's awesome to see. Yes, you got the right idea. Okay, Ivan says, in case I tailor my resume to that particular job, I need especially the work experience and leave out some experiences that are irrelevant to the recruiter. How do I account for the chronology resume? Yes, that's another excellent point. Here's what I would do. Listen, I don't have the perfect answer for you, because you're right. If you eliminate jobs based on the fact that that job wasn't directly related to what this recruiter is looking for, how do you explain the work gap, right? The gap in your history. So what I would do is I would put the job in, I would make sure it's not prominent, and I wouldn't really have a lot of detail. I'd have very little detail, okay? I would just maybe say the title of this, you know, worked here, you know, something like that. That's one option, right? You know, and I wouldn't worry about it too much beyond that. Okay, but you see, the problem is that you applied for a supervisor role, and they say, we care about supervisory experience in the plastics industry. And then half of your resume is taking up describing 2 jobs that were not in the plastics industry, that were not in a supervisory role, right? And they have nothing to do with like this job opportunity in any way, but yet it takes up half your resume. That would be a problem. Mentioning them might not be the end of the world, but just having them take up all this space, that would be maybe a red flag. Okay, Carmiego says, how should I list stretch assignments in my resume? Does it hold value for recruiters? How to maximize them? What are stretch assignments? Like, are you talking about, is this like in the context of education? Like you're given an assignment? Or are you talking about, you know, you've had a job and you've been given a task, like a project that was maybe outside of your normal job responsibilities. Maybe they were giving you extra work to develop certain skills, to possibly train you for, you know, promotion, being promoted into a role or something. Is that what you're referring to? Now remember, like when you say list assignments, the last thing I would be interested in if I was reading a resume for a job is going through a laundry list of various things you've done, right? What I want to see is I want to see things relevant to me, which means if I've said in the job description, I'm looking for these five things, I want to see bam, 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 bam. You've got those five things. Or at least you mention them. You assure me that they're not an issue in any way. Okay? So listing things, like how would you go about doing it? Well, you write it down. There's really not much more to it. If an explanation is required, I would keep it very short, like just a couple of words. I would put, in this job, here are my, my duties or my accomplishments or my results, and then, point, here's a stretch assignment, I did this. Point, here's another stretch assignment, special project, I did that. That would be it for me. I don't think you need to do much more than that, because nobody really cares unless you're feeding back to them the things that they said they were looking for. And I wouldn't try and list every single assignment and every single thing you've ever done. That's not only is it not helpful, it can actually detract and have all this extra crap that they don't care about. It dilutes what you do have. Maximize their value. Is that the thing that I was... No, that was something else. Gigs. Oh, gig is stretch assignment. Okay. I thought that was an acronym, like GIG. Hold on a second. Okay. Yeah, this is like new terms. Internal learning gigs that simultaneously offer an employee chance. Yeah, okay, I get it. Like a special project, it's meant to do employee development, basically. Okay. Yeah, I mean, listen, I wouldn't worry about introducing it, saying it's this type of thing. To be honest with you, for me, I would just say, I did this. I've taken this course. I've experienced doing this. I did this project. We achieved this result. Like, I wouldn't worry about introducing it so that they know, oh, that was a stretch assignment. I would just say it. This is what I've done. For the purposes of brevity, right? You get right to the point. They don't care under what circumstances you did it, or if it was part of your regular job. They don't care. They're giving you 5 seconds of their time. Get right to it. Okay. Does that make sense, Carmiego? You make a good point, but that's how I feel about that. Ed Hewitt says, a resume is an advertisement of yourself and your abilities. It's meant to sell yourself, just like other ads. Yes, we know that. Ivan says, thanks a lot, Bill. This is a game changer. Well, good. Carmiego, stretch assignment is, I work in collections, accounts receivable. They gave me tasks in account to report and global project to improve collection strategy. What is the value of project assignments? Okay. Yeah, well, I would just say I did, you can condense that down to its core, which is, I completed a project to improve global collection strategy. And then you would presumably have your result, your accomplishment. We reduced late collections by X, or percentage or dollar amount, something like that. Or I was part of a team that, led a project to improve collection strategy of our global operations. We achieved, a 10% improvement in recovering late collections, or bad debt, or whatever it is, something like that. Like, I would just get that down nice and compact and just say it. Don't worry about introducing it. Don't worry about talking about the circumstances under which it was done. Just say it. This is what we did. This was the result. I was part of the team that did that. The end. Right? Nice and compact. Avid Runner. Hello. How far back with work history should be on a resume? What if I was a manager 10 years ago but never landed in a similar position since then? Do I need to continue to list that experience? That's going to vary, but as a general rule, you would give less and less detail the older the job goes. Okay, the further back it goes. But something like what you just described, that's significant. If you were a manager 10 years ago, so you have management experience, and let's say you were in the role for like 4 years, like it wasn't just a flash in the pan. You were there for a while. That demonstrates that you were at least halfway decent at it, and you at least could tolerate it. You know, you didn't quit. You weren't demoted. You weren't fired. You stuck around. That shows that it was well within your capabilities. So I would definitely list the job title and the dates. Now, if you want to go into more detail, you can, but you know, you have to really justify everything you'd write about a job that's 10 years old. Okay? The way recruiters think. If this is going to a recruiter, that's how they think. Now, if you were in your 50s and you're applying for an executive role, you know, or something, you've been in that industry for 30 years, you were a manager in that industry most recently 10 years ago, you know, that's still relevant, and you could go into a little bit more detail for that, right? So it's going to vary, but generally the further you go, the briefer you are, the less details you give, and you could even just list the job title and the dates, and that would be enough under a lot of circumstances. The reason I say that is because what you described is something significant. You were a manager and you stuck it out. So I would at least like to say that, unless there's a real reason not to, and it depends what you're applying for. But, you know, like, it would be hard to justify not even mentioning that unless it's going to detract from what you're putting in for. Oh, you say if I decide to apply again for manager. Oh, if you decide to apply again, definitely. That's directly related to it. So yeah, you would keep it on there. You might not dedicate an entire page to it, but you know, you would have it on there, maybe a couple of details, and that's it. Carmiego says, "Thank you, Bill. You clarified for me. I know how to handle them." Good. That's great to hear. Phantom Valentine, what if I'm applying for a project manager job, but my only experience is through running my own business? I know we aren't supposed to list our side gigs, but is there a way to add it strategically? That's a great question. You know, I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know the answer to that. You would need to crawl inside the brain of a recruiter, and sometimes that can be hard, because while some of them are really good at what they do, others are completely out to lunch. So it's hard to say how they would regard that. If that were me, I would just leave it off. You know, or what I would do is, you know how earlier I was mentioning, you know, you have your name at the top, you have your tagline, and then some people put some form of career summary or career profile where they essentially write a paragraph about themselves, right? It's like a summary. You could include it in there. You could say, I have extensive experience, or 5 years experience, whatever it is, in doing this, this, and this, and this, and this, right? But it's not tied to a job on the chronological part of your resume where you said, I worked for myself, or I worked for my own company, right? So you can maybe do something like that, and that gets it on there, but it's not tied to a thing that advertises, you know, I'm an entrepreneur, I've got my own business. Maybe something like that. But yes, you're right. Generally, you don't. It's not that you don't list side gigs, but you don't list your own company, your own entrepreneurial efforts, because it's stupid. Recruiters, they're coming at this from a loyalty perspective, and that's where listing the stuff makes you look bad. Makes you look like, oh, if we hire you, you're going to go do your own thing on the side and then leave to do that if it takes off, and you're prioritizing that the whole time. They don't see it as for what it also is, which is like a technical boon, like a tremendous advantage. I mean, I'd love to hire people that, you know, have entrepreneurial experience if there was a way to guarantee that they would be committed to working for me, I mean, it's incredibly valuable experience. They make the best employees if their loyalties are to their employer. You're welcome, Avid Runner. Ed Hewitt, if an applicant is above 60 years old, do you hide any indication of your age in the resume? Well, I wouldn't list my age if that's what you're asking. If your work experience goes back 40 years, yes, if you list 40 years of work experience, you're kind of giving away your age. But you normally wouldn't be doing that anyway. Anything over 10 years old, you would have to have a very good reason for including that on your resume. Now listen, I understand me clearly, okay, everybody. I'm not saying that experience is not valuable, because it is. But what I'm talking about is in the context of, remember, this document, this resume, it's a marketing tool to help you get an interview. And the way recruiters think is they think that anything old is irrelevant. They think silly things like if you don't use it, you lose it. That's been taught to recruiters directly and indirectly for a very long time, which is stupid. But the thing is, you've got to dance to their tune. You've got to give them what they're looking for and not give them things that they regard as bad, right? Get the job. And between you and me, we all know that older experience is very useful. We all know that having tried your hand at like side gigs is very, very educational. It really enhances your capabilities. We all know this. Get the job and then show them what you can do by excelling in your job because you have these things. And if that means you have to leave off, experience off your resume, it's older than 10 years old or something like that, so be it. You'll have the last laugh. It'll be a good one. You might crack a rib. I've laughed at recruiters many times. I've also wept, but it's all good. Avid Runner, is there a rule as to how long a resume needs to be, 1 page or 2 pages? Well, I said that earlier, 2 pages. Like you can get away with 1 page if, say, you are coming out of school, you've never had a real job before. Like, okay, maybe you can get away with that. But the rule is 2 pages. No longer than 2 pages. I don't care if you've worked 140 jobs in your life, no more than 2 pages. Okay? And we're talking about a resume here. We're not talking about a CV. CV is for academic work, publications you published. That's a completely different thing. That can be very long. But a resume, 2 pages max. Phantom Valentine says, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I guess it's best to just try to land an actual project manager job and add it to my name. Oh, did I say that? Project manager about experience. Yeah, like leaving your own entrepreneurial stuff off the resume. Yeah. Like, as I said, these people are they're biased against you having done entrepreneurial efforts. It's stupid because it's the right attitude to have. It shows a lot of amazing traits, but they are biased against it because they're coming at this from a loyalty perspective. That's mainly the lens they're looking at. They're looking through when they make judgments about you. And if they see entrepreneurial stuff on there, that's a huge red flag for, okay, if we employ this person, they will do their own side gigs. They will prioritize their own side gigs, and they will not be a great employee, and they might leave suddenly when their side gigs pay off. So, yes. Meb says, they'll ask when you graduated college, dead giveaway. Well, it's kind of hard to get, if they're going to do that, it's kind of like what, apart from refusing to answer the question, what can you do about that? They may ask you your birthday. Yeah, they may, right? They may ask you a lot of things. They may ask you for your credit card number, but, just because they ask doesn't mean that you have to give them it, right? Just so you know. Like, a lot of times when I talk to younger people and people in their early 20s, I was in my early 20s once. I totally get it. But it's funny because people are so intimidated. Oh, no, they may ask me this. It's like, well, let them ask. That's confidential information. So you need to know how to address those types of questions, right? And the answer to that, as a general rule, is to say, well, I generally don't give that information out because I regard it as personal and confidential, and there are privacy concerns, and I'm sure you understand. Just that, that's like a template answer to not disclose things that you don't want to disclose when they've asked you directly about it. Just because they ask doesn't mean that you either have to give them full and complete information or you have to freeze up and look like an idiot. No, there's a proper way to answer, a very dignified, professional way where you still feel like a badass, right? But you don't give them the thing that they're asking for because they're asking for something inappropriate or something that you're just not willing to disclose, right? Now, if that means that you're automatically disqualified, sometimes that can happen. But I mean, if an interviewer is going to disqualify you for not saying your age, that kind of reveals the interviewer for what they are, which is this is not done in good faith. This is they've got some kind of weird agenda going on, and it might even be illegal depending where in the world you are when they do this, right? So, you know what I mean? They may ask a lot of things. And sometimes they used to do these things called stress interviews. They still do them sometimes. They're gradually, my feeling is they're gradually fading away, but they used to do these things called stress interviews where they intentionally give you a hard time in the interview just to see how you handle that type of situation. If you're up for a customer service type job or for any other job that requires, you have to really stand your ground against a tough line of questioning that people might ask you. They intentionally bring you in and do a stress interview. They have like 4 people on the other side of the table, all asking you questions, all busting your chops about well, I've never, every other applicant that we've asked, they always give us this. What's your problem? All this kind of hostile kind of questioning, very direct questions, a lot of social pressure they put on you just to see, are you the type of person that can handle that? Or do you crack completely and, handle it very poorly? And they still do those in some circles. So just go and do some Google searches or something and look for, how do I answer this type of question if I don't want to disclose, and get some examples and get a little arsenal of those in the back of your mind so that if anyone, not just in job interviews, but if anyone in life, grills you about something and you just don't want to disclose something, you'll know the perfect response that will shut them down, and yet it will still feel like you're on top of things. So something to learn. And also, by the way, one important last thing I'll say about that is that the thing I just described, like a sort of prepared answer to something you don't want to reveal, that doesn't mean that you have to all of a sudden end the flow and good vibe of the conversation. All of a sudden now everyone's awkward and, they killed the mood and, now it just feels tense. No, if you know what you're doing, there's ways to shut down questions like that, but yet it still feels friendly. It still feels productive. There isn't a bad vibe. It's just a matter of learning what to say and then practicing it a few times, and you will get good at that stuff, and that will really help you out. Okay, Anmal says, hey, Bill, I'm a student with no work experience in my industry, so what should I include in my resume? I'm looking for my first job. Okay, first of all, like I always say, when someone says, I have no experience, you're lying. You're wrong. You do have experience. You have a lot of experience, a lot more than you think you do. What do they look for when you get a job? They're looking for someone who can follow instructions. They're looking for someone who can meet deadlines. They're looking for someone who can work unsupervised. You don't have to have the boss standing over your shoulder all the time to make sure that you're working. They're looking for someone that's punctual, who'll show up on time. They're looking for someone that can be relied on. They're looking for someone who will bring an issue back to their boss if they're having an issue. But if they're not having an issue, they'll just get on with the job, right? They're looking for someone who's trainable, who can learn new things on demand, and someone who's disciplined, and someone who has a good work ethic. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you've been in school, you have all of those, right? So you have experience completing projects, doing assignments. You have experience learning a hell of a lot of new material under a tight deadline, or doing a lot of work under a tight deadline, or having to have the initiative to ask for help when you ran into an issue. But when you don't have a real issue, you just get on with it. You have stories that you can tell about what you've done that prove all of these, right? Examples of all of these. Okay, success stories that demonstrate all of these. So these are some of the things that you can start by putting on your resume. Projects you've completed, especially big challenges that you've overcome. You showed initiative, and when something's confusing and you got a test coming up, you went and got help from the instructor, got a little bit of guidance, came back, applied it, figured it out, learned the stuff, did the assignment, passed the course, right? So these are all stories you can tell, right? So if you're looking for stuff to put on your resume, you could start listing these things, okay? So that's a good starting point, okay? So you always have stuff to put on your resume, and you always have stuff to talk about in an interview, especially if they ask you all those behavioral questions where they say, tell me about a time where you had to, innovate to do your job or something like that. You can pull out a story. Oh, well, okay, I took this class at university, very tough class. The professor was very well known for being a real, challenging professor, very tough assignments. He assigned a project, involved this, I did this, I had to go to these lengths to figured it out, did the assignment, got, in the top 10% marks in my class, passed with flying colors, and I learned a great deal. Something like that. Like, you'll be able to answer those questions by drawing on your experience. Just because you've got this experience in your education doesn't mean that it's inapplicable. It doesn't have to be experience you get on the job. It can be experience you get in school if it's relevant, right? And a lot of these things are relevant. Phantom Valentine says, is it a red flag if they demand to know if you've been laid off? Should I be wary of the company at that point? Well, when you say demand, it depends what you mean, like how forcefully they're insisting you tell them that. But first of all, I suspect you might know the answer to this already, but if you got laid off from a different company, that's none of their business, right? It's like saying, you went out with somebody 10 years ago, and now you're thinking of asking somebody out, and they want to know if you went out with them. It's like, that's none of your business. You know what I mean? Maybe if we work together more and we trust each other more, then maybe I'll involve you in the details of my romantic life or something in the past. But you know what I mean? Like, when we've just met, that's the first thing they want to know. And I demand that you tell me. It's like, how would you feel about that? It's a little bit of a red flag. Yes. Okay. Now, listen, recruiters are going to push for things. They're going to try and get information out of you that they're not entitled to. But if they ask and you tell them, right, it's not really, they haven't really done anything wrong, right? You know what I mean? There's no law that says they can't ask that question, right? All the law says is that you're not under any obligation to reveal this if you don't want to, right? It's none of their business. They're not entitled to that. But it doesn't stop them asking. So if you choose to tell them, that's fine, right? But if you don't want to tell them, you don't have to, right? Now, what I would do is I wouldn't say, no, I absolutely refuse to answer any question of that nature. Like that signals a bunch of, well, it's just not really clicking, is it? It's awkward and it's contentious and, I'm not really giving you a great impression as an employee you'd want to work with. Mind you, you're not also giving me a good impression as a boss I'd want to work for. But what I would do is I would try and deflect it. I would just say, if have you been laid off? It's like, well, I would say no. Personally, even if you have, I would say no. Because A, it's none of their business. You're under no legal requirement to discuss it. They shouldn't really be asking. It has no bearing on your job that you're going up for. You know what I mean? And in a lot of countries in the world, that type of bias is actually things that people have sued companies over and won, So I would just say no. You know what I mean? Like, that's just me. I mean, remember, being laid off is no reflection on you. It's the company ran out of money and they had to lay off their employees. I think maybe what you might be asking about is if you've been fired. Being fired is like a for-cause thing, right? Once again, that's none of their business, right? You're under no legal obligation to reveal that if you don't want to, right? Now, if you feel that by the very act of saying, I refuse to answer or I don't want to disclose that, you're going to blow the whole interview, I wouldn't judge you too harshly if you said no, to be honest with you. Now, I'm sure I'm going to get some criticism because people are going to say, oh, well, isn't that lying? Well, of course it's lying. But then again, we're relying on a question that they're not really entitled to. You know what I'm saying? So I'll let you judge whether that's something that advice you'd want to take or not. Ed Hewitt says, so are you telling us not to feel bad? I'm not telling you anything. I'm just giving responses to things if it helps, because it is meant for us. Well, look, I don't recall talking about that really, this live stream, but when it comes to job rejection, the reality is that if you're applying with resumes, usually that's for posted jobs, and usually most posted jobs have hundreds of applicants, right? So by definition, you'll have hundreds of people for every job that get rejected. So, you know what I mean? The other thing I know, and I know this for a fact, is that people who hire, certainly some people who hire, they have the most out to lunch thought processes of what they think makes a good applicant and what doesn't. So, I've seen people rejected because they weren't tall enough or they weren't short enough or they looked, they just, oh, I didn't like that person, like these wishy-washy kind of things. And in order for you to like that person, knowing a bit about you, I know that means that they have to be like you, And if the person wasn't exactly like you, that's why they got rejected, and that's retarded. So, should people feel bad for being rejected for those reasons? I would say not. You're never going to learn the real reason why you were rejected. It could be valid or it could be invalid. The only way to detect if it's a valid reason, maybe you're just doing something wrong, is if you go a very long time with very few bites, right? And in which case you may want to try and get some feedback from, maybe objective sources, do mock interviews with other people, and try and look inward and look at what people say to do and compare that with what you're doing and, see if you can detect any kind of issue there. But the nature of this game, if you're hunting for a job, is that you're going to be rejected a hell of a lot. The smartest, most capable people get rejected a hell of a lot too. So that's all I'm saying. Joel says, sorry, I was late here. Do you have any advice for resumes and how HR bots will read them? yes, what you need to do is go back to the beginning of the live stream and hit play. Crichton says, goodness, you just described the type of person I'm looking for. Oh, okay. Follow instruction, work without me having to stand over them. Yeah, well, that's what most bosses want, right? Let me tell you, from being a boss, the last thing you want is an employee that, has 1,000 questions about everything all the time. When I tell them, like, I need you to go and do this, and then they go, yeah, but how do you want me to do? You want me to do it this way? You want me to do that? It's like, okay, well, I want you to do it that way. Okay, but then, do you want it done now? Do you want it done? Can I wait 10 minutes? It's like, just go and do it, please. You don't want to have to stand over everyone and micromanage them. What bosses want, generally speaking, is people that you can just give them an assignment to, and they'll go and they'll take care of it. They'll come back to you if there's an issue, like a real issue, or they need real clarification, right? But everything reasonable they can just take care of, and it's done, right? And then it leaves you to get on with a lot of the other things that you have to do, right? You don't just have one subordinate. You've got a lot of subordinates, and you've got your own work on top of that. So, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's what a lot of bosses want. And another pet peeve is when people don't follow your instructions, but they follow some artistic variation of your instructions. That's annoying too. Phantom says, for clarification, I was trying to apply for a job online, and they mandated the question so that I couldn't submit or proceed with an application if I didn't answer. Yeah, I guess I should have said no. I was just worried that they would call my employer and find the truth if they said otherwise. Wait a minute. They're asking you if you've been laid off, and they're going to call your employer. Like, they're asking if you've been laid off from your current employer. That's an interesting thing. I think I get it. But yeah, whenever they give you those fields, those mandatory fields in an online job application that you can't skip, and you have to put a number or an answer, it's for the purposes of, it's like a go, no go test. And if you fail, your application is automatically rejected right there. That's what those are for. So if they have those questions that you can't skip, that like, have you ever done, and it's yes or no, that's what they're there for. The majority of them. So, I mean, look, if they're asking for something stupid like that, look, first of all, I just want it to be clear here. These are dumb jobs. Now, I get it. Sometimes needs must. You apply for everything so you can get something. But if that's the case, I would just put no. If they're asking for something that's just legally none of their business, never mind about how they were allowed to put up that form that asks that. Just say no. It's none of their business. That's what I would do. Put it that way. Ed Hewitt, how do you deal with a recruiter that is gaslighting you in the interview? Just hit him. There you go. Problem solved. The problem solves itself. Corentin, but not. Corentin says, hi, Bill. I was hired by a French company as a building structural engineer, graduated a year and a half ago. They pushed me out gently with a special mutual agreed termination contract because I was missing out of strong technical skills, and I also know that they were running out of work due to a building estate crisis. However, they never complained about my behavior and my other knowledges. Now I'm looking for a new job, and I still don't know how to attract recruiters' attention, a cover letter, or during an interview without putting myself in an awkward situation. Okay, so that's a very specific story and then a very general question at the end of it. Well, go back and listen to what I said in this live stream. I gave you 8 points in a resume about how you should do a resume. So if that's what you're looking for, I can't explain all the rules for a cover letter and what you would do in every situation. So sorry, that's just not possible to do right now. All I would say is learn about how to do a resume. If that's what you're doing, you're applying through standard channels and you're applying for jobs that are posted. Okay. It sounds like you're just sort of entering the whole job seeker thing, and you have some boning up to do on how to go about looking for a job. You've got a lot of different options available to you. You've got networking and this huge umbrella that's under the moniker of networking that you have at your disposal. Those are much more effective than the alternative, which is sending out job applications for internet jobs. Usually you need the resume for that, and then a lot of times you have to, in addition to sending a resume, you've got to fill in the application, right? If you're sending in online applications, sometimes they require a very formal cover letter. Sometimes they don't. A cover letter really isn't necessary. It should be about 3 sentences saying why you're sending them this thing, what's it for, and who you are. That's really all the cover letter is for. Traditionally, if you're sending an email to apply for a job and you attach your resume, the cover letter is really the body of the email. It says like, okay, here's why I'm sending you an email. I'm applying for this job. Please find my resume attached. This is who I am. Here's my contact information. And I hope that I will hear back from you. And that's really all there is to it. Now, some companies, they like to, because they don't really understand how to evaluate candidates very effectively, they insist upon like you sending them this big fancy cover letter that goes into all your motivations for everything. And they usually don't even read those, but they insist that you send them. Nowadays, people are just using a lot of AI to write the cover letter, and then they're going back and tweaking what the AI wrote just, to make it sound like it came from a human. And that's actually working for a lot of people. So, I mean, you've got to learn about these different areas. I mean, I've got a course that takes you through everything. There's a lot of other resources out there. Obviously, I recommend that you do this. That's why I created this. This takes all the relevant stuff, puts it all in one place. And it's also great for an introduction to the world of networking, especially if you're an introvert, where you reach out to organizations, not recruiters, not HR people, but hiring managers and people that can actually help you and open doors. And you can tap what some people call the hidden job market, which is all the jobs that are actually out there, but they're not posted. So they exist, but they're filled before they need to be posted. You can actually put yourself up for those too. In which case, you don't have to worry about any of these stupid rules about cover letters or resumes. What matters is being able to have a very simple conversation with hiring manager, and that's what's important. They will be blown away by who you are as a person and the fact that you're even there, because you're the only one that's doing that. That instantly elevates yourself above all the other people who didn't do that. Okay, so, I mean, that's a very general question. I can't answer everything you need to do. You need to go out and learn how everything works and start getting some experience by applying for jobs and getting specific answers to specific questions. Okay, Corentin, I wish you the absolute best of luck. I got a lot of videos on this channel, and there's a lot of great resources out there that will help you towards that goal. Phantom Valentine says, that makes me feel much more empowered. Thank you very much. Great. That's great to hear, Phantom Valentine. That's awesome. I'm going to start ramping this down in a couple of minutes. So if you have any last questions, maybe get in the chat now. Mega says, how do I showcase my skills in internships with no relevant experience since I'm a second-year student pursuing my finance degree and I'm just starting out? Well, that's pretty general. Skills in what? Like, are we talking soft skills? Are we talking hard skills? What are we talking about? Listen, learn how to talk to people. What you want to do is you want to, kind of like what I was saying 5 to 10 minutes ago, you want to be a person who the boss can come to and say, look, I need you to do this, okay? And you go away and you do it. Now, if you're in school, you will have a lot of the skills that I listed 5 minutes ago. You have good work ethic, you understand punctuality, you're highly trainable, you're responsible, you respect deadlines, you have the initiative to come back if you're having an issue to get clarification or assistance. But other than that, anything reasonable, you don't come back and pester the boss. You just get on with the job that's assigned and you do it, right? And then you come back and you submit a good result. So that's what you need to do. And while you're doing that, you need to be friendly, you need to be approachable. They need to enjoy interacting with you. If you're always giving them grief, if you're always bringing up issues, if you're always finding fault with, them or the work or the tools or the environment or your coworkers, or that's all going to be seen as a negative. They want someone that's just low maintenance and agreeable and enjoyable to deal with. That's what they're looking for. So attitude is half of that. And, if you have a question, being able to go to your boss when they're not in the middle of something and they're not stressed out and say you got a couple of minutes, just can I talk to you for a couple minutes? And, they'll say, sure. And you go into their office or whatever and say look, listen, I was wondering about this. When I have to deal with this, would you prefer that I do it this way? Or would you prefer that I do it that way? Or would you prefer that I check with this other person first? What would you say? And do that. And what that does is, first of all, it helps you get answers and learn how to do your job better. But it also signals that you're the type of person that cares about improving yourself and giving the boss more what they want, right? So that also helps too. Okay. Don't worry about I have no experience. It seems a lot more intimidating than it actually is. Once you get out and you start doing this stuff, whether it's an internship or you get on the job, you'll realize this is a lot simpler than I thought it was. Okay. It's a lot more straightforward and it's less intimidating than I thought it was. Right. It's just because it's an unknown right now that it seems like this big, intimidating, complicated thing. It's really not. You're going to do fine, okay? Just go into it with the right attitude. Try to do the best you can, and try and be reasonably friendly and positive about the whole thing, and you'll do fine. Okay, last couple of questions. Hi, Bill. I missed the first half of the stream. Do I need to put in the resume if I have an NDA, or just tell it in the interview? I don't think there's a absolute answer for that. I wouldn't, if it were me, I wouldn't put it in the resume. And the only time I would bring it up is if they directly asked you something where you'd have to break an NDA to answer it. That's the only time I'd bring that up. Because it's a negative. It's I'm under an NDA, you can't ask me this and you can't ask me that, it creates barriers. So I wouldn't bring it up unless you get to that point where they've directly asked you something that, according to your NDA, you can't reveal. In which case you would say, I'm sorry, I'm under an NDA and I unfortunately can't reveal that. I'm sure you understand, right? Very simple. And Mega says, thank you very much for this advice. I have been following you since last year and you are awesome. Well, thank you. You're awesome too, Mega. Everybody who's here and is trying to actively improve themselves is awesome. You guys will go far after quite a while of learning and applying what you've learned. You will come out on top. So thank you for joining me today. If you want to go deeper and you want to learn how to get a job, you want everything all in one place with templates where I lay down all the principles for you, and or you're also interested in doing tapping networking as a way to get a lot of other better job opportunities and put yourself forward for them, and you're wondering how to do that, especially if you're an introvert like me, and you don't want to do this by going to events and schmoozing with people and all this kind of stuff. Instead, you want a much more focused, much more sort of introverted way of doing it from your computer, from your phone, where you set everything up that way, and then you get invited to go meet somebody and have a coffee or something with them. If that's kind of the way you would like to do it, in particular, this course is totally for you. That's what I teach there. That's a big chunk of it. And that's helped a lot of people get some great opportunities. Alternatively, if you are looking to learn business, check out this $100 MBA course. It's not really a course, it's actually a program. And it covers everything you would learn in a full 2-year brick and mortar MBA program at university, where you get a master's degree in business. I know this because I have an MBA myself. I created this course for this very purpose. You get the textbooks, you go through them. I guide you through the books with videos, and you learn the same material. You could skim it. You could go in depth. You could do this totally on your own schedule at your convenience. So if you want to learn business, this will help you learn skills that can help get you promoted in your job. It can also get you into the world of entrepreneurship if that's something that's interesting to you. And finally, I have this up here, Write Like a Professional course. If you're wanting to develop your social skills, knowing what to say and how to communicate with people, it's a course about, it's not a basic course. It's about like how to write as an executive, how to communicate and what to say in different situations. If that's of any interest to you, check out that course. That's probably the simplest of all the courses that I have. There are links in the description box of this video for all of these. And I've also made videos that describe these courses in depth. So it's very transparent. You know what you're getting into if it's something that you're interested in. But yeah, check it out. Thanks very much. I will be back next week, same time, with another episode of How to Get Hired with our online Q&A. Until then, take care. I wish you nothing but the best.